My name's Hugh Winterbottom. I am from Mosley, and this is where my studio is, and at Wood End Mill in Mosley.
Hi, I'm Liz Ackerley. I'm based in Wood End Mill, and I'm a mixed media artist, which means I use all manner of media, including acrylics and collage and other papers that have got text in them, and all sorts of other media, including charcoals and pencils and so on. My background is design, and that's landscape design, and the landscape and the surroundings have always been a fascination for me. I think I've always felt very at home in landscapes. I feel a sense of sort of balance in landscapes, and so it's always been something I've pursued. Yeah, interestingly, when I started my development as an artist, I first of all started as an illustrator, and then I was really focusing on non-landscape type subjects, especially sort of cities and so on. But it was always that sense of place and being able to create that feel of place and what that is all about, those feelings in my work. And so the opportunity, living in Mosley, surrounded by these stunning landscapes of moors and woodland and valleys, just seemed like a really interesting topic that was, had a lot of resonance with what I was interested in.
The exhibition came about by me and Liz. We had been painting and drawing a lot in Manchester, and we decided it was getting a bit too busy and a bit too loud, so we sort of headed over towards the countryside where we lived, and we started painting and drawing around sort of in the hills, and we enjoyed that a lot. And we decided, well, we've been thinking about having a joint exhibition for quite some time. So we decided we could do it on, nature and the surroundings.
We started having discussions with a number of galleries, actually, including Oldham. And from there, we put a proposal in, and it was quite fortuitous timings, and we were, successful. And our work was all about the landscape and the surrounding landscape. So I think that had a resonance with Oldham. Early on, we had a proposal which was much wider a remit than we subsequently ended up with, and that included not only the moors but also seascape and coastal landscape. And of course, that wasn't going to happen for the reasons that we'll kind of discuss. But the research was really to sort of explore what was accessible to us and where we could go. And so originally we had, even the moors, we were thinking of going wider afield than just Mosley. However, Mosley, as it happens, has wonderful landscape very close to us. And I think it surprised us. That sounds a bit strange, but first of all, we went to Marsden Moor, and we went, miles afield. And just to sort of get a check on these different landscapes. And for me, it became quite clear quite early on that I was interested in some very specific things about the landscape, and I was also quite interested in the seasons. And certain seasons for me had certain resonance. So I was interested in the moors during their sort of extreme times, really. So during the heather season, when they were in flower, and in the winter when they were quite harsh and austere. Similarly, I became very interested in woodland because I was fascinated by the transition seasons. So the spring when they come to life, and the autumn when the beautiful colours are there. And so that was the thing that really drove my research. So I kind of started researching and looking at those seasons and those landscapes in that way.
The first stage was the studies, really, and just to get the feel of what we were going to do, and by sketching and painting and going out there, and we were going to take that work into the studio, because it's hard to know what the work was going to be like, because we were very much work on our methods and working it out as we go along, and using our feelings on how the work was going to be. first group of paintings, I didn't start them straight away because I wanted to do a lot more study work outside. So using sketches with watercolour and pen and different medium charcoals and just get to know the subject really. And then eventually I took that into the studio and I started the first 6 studio paintings using various sort of techniques from over the years. All my best, all my favourite sort of techniques I like to use, and a few new ones. And I started the first 6, and then the first lockdown happened. So I didn't do anything in the first lockdown until it was the rules were relaxed and we were allowed out again. And then I just went out and took the oil paints out and the easel and I started doing plein air paintings for the entire summer of 2020. So they were the first ones really that were finished and completed, were probably about 20 or 30 plein air paintings during that summer.
For me, the first year was very much going to be exploring and finding out what it was I was interested in, and then developing my feel of those places. And I always think about my sort of work on location as the way that I kind of my sort of connection with the experience, if you like. And so in that first year I was very much going out onto all those landscapes in those seasons to actually draw and do studies and write about those landscapes. And so then the second year, which is 2021, became the year of the paintings. But I kept going out in that second year to the landscapes as well, so it wasn't sort of quite an easy demarcation in that way. But certainly I think of the first year as being my exploration and research to a greater extent, and then the explorations continue when you're developing the paintings, but that's more in the studio. So that's how I kind of handled it really.
I used the sketches as an aid to produce the studio work. So I was usually working A3 or A4 on a board, and then I would have everything, like my watercolours and everything, just stood up so it was all balanced, and so then I could just stand next to a branch or a tree, and then just very simple watercolours, not detailed or anything. So I'll just make a mark with the green and then just let that dry, and then put another layer on top of that, and then maybe a couple of details with an ink pen. So they were very fresh and white, so there's a lot of white space, so I wasn't filling the whole page, so then the subject would be the focus. So then I take that into the studio and just dot them around the easel, and then do the main painting from the sketches. And I would just sort of relax and just drop my shoulders and just have a little think about it all, and then eventually I'd pick up the paint, and I usually always start with just a mark with sienna, dip it into the sort of diluted tips, and then just make a mark, and hopefully it would be okay, and it usually was. And if it wasn't, it didn't really matter, because you'd make a new, another mark, and then you broke into the canvas. Then you've started then, so then you can, just relax, and then just so not rushing it really, but being spontaneous at the same time, just like you would be with the sketch. So that's how I'd start them. Didn't always work out, but most of them did.
The first group I started were the Winter Moors paintings. So I started painting actually at the beginning of 2021. And I was really, I suppose, for most of the time I was trying to track the seasons which did become a little bit like, I did feel a bit like I was chasing, as opposed to chasing rainbows, I was chasing seasons. But the first group were the winter moors, and that was really interesting because I was doing a group or a small selection that were about my memories of being on Marsden Moor, at the same time as I was doing another smaller group looking at the moors from a distance. And the reason I was doing that was that we were in lockdown and I couldn't actually physically get onto the moors. But that actually gave me quite an interesting kind of contrast between interaction with the actual location itself. My work is really all about the feelings of these places. I'm not trying to create a representational view. So when I'm out doing the studies, I need to, by the very nature of them, I need to work in different ways to create different kind of captures of the whatever it is, the moors or the woodland. So I work in black and white, I work in acrylics, I do mixed media. I actually do this thing where I have a Constantina sketchbook that are actually on display in the gallery, where I actually prepare them with collage material and then I go out and work over them. So I'm constantly after creating sort of works that represent my experience of those landscapes in all these different ways, and then I put them on the studio wall so that I can use them as my inspiration for development of the paintings. I had this kind of need in a way, or interest in sort of developing a body of drawings or sketches, whatever you like to call them. And it ended up like mark making over the whole of the year, month by month. So what I went out, we're very fortunate in Moseley. We have this wonderful panoramic view of Saddleworth Moors, of Noonsun Hill, of Slate Pit Moor, and so on. And so I went out on a monthly basis with a huge A2 piece of paper and with all my mixed media, and actually recorded the marks I was observing in that landscape. And it gave me that kind of real connection with the landscape. And I suppose one of the huge things about being local is that we could go out and interrogate that landscape and really study it through the seasons. And that mark making each month, at first I was thinking, I'm going to do this for 12 months and I wonder how different it will be. But it's really been quite extraordinary how each month, not only do you get the changes in colour, but you also get the changes in mark and textures. And so what I then did with those sheets was that each month I folded it into a booklet, and those 12 booklets are shown as part of the exhibition. But what they are really useful for, it was a bit like the collage folded concertinas. They actually take that landscape, and instead of you getting a literal view of the moors and the land and the woodland and the valleys, it ends up by being folded into a booklet. You get these extraordinary ways in which the lines and the marks form on the different pages, and so that's now become a kind of almost like a database of sorts, or a mark base of my mark making through the seasons that I've been using in exploration and developing the paintings.
The materials I used for the paintings was very much oil paint, just because it retains its colour, and it will travel quite far on the canvas, and you can do it in pastel, which is very thick paint, or washes. And then you can also add, different mediums to it if you wanted to. But usually I just use the paint and maybe like a tips and linseed oil, and that's the most I would go into it. Really, I would very much just like the colours, because I go for colours when I paint. I usually use the same colour palette, and occasionally I would experiment with different colours. Like from the beginning of the exhibition, to the working from the first bit into the last one, I have added new paints and new colours, and but not not a great deal. Just maybe colours that might be richer in, in the browns and siennas and different ochres and things like that, to get them earthy colours more.
I don't think there's any perfect medium, and the thing about my work is that I'm building up a richness and a layering in the process of the work. I'm trying to develop a real sort of atmosphere whether it's on canvas or whether it's on panels, and the way I kind of do that really is to build up the layers, and I'm putting paints on and paper on and so on. And if I was using a slower drying media like oils, I would really struggle with that, whereas acrylic lets me build up the layers and build up a richness that's not just the acrylic, but I can put paper on, I can stick that down on the acrylic, I can work over it with pencils, I can fix it. So it just gives me a bit of flexibility for me building up the textures and the interest that I want to kind of create, really.
When we started the work together, we always went out sketching together, and doing all the studies outside. But then in the studio, Liz would go to her studio and I would go to mine, and then produce our own work. But we'd probably, we'd visit each other as well to see how we're doing, and it was quite interesting, really, because we probably did. Well, we do influence each other. Probably, but you don't really realise that you do that, because we talk about it a lot as well, ideas and different ways of working, and other artists, and we admire similar artists. So yeah, it's quite interesting, really. So you do work together a lot without knowing it, but outside when we're sketching, we usually go into the same places to produce the work from, really. So yeah, it does work really well.
We went out on location together and created a lot of studies, so our experiences were somewhat similar in terms of but how we translated that was very different, and we always knew it would be different, and we kind of wanted it to be very different, really. So in a way, we at the beginning and through the first year, we did a lot of studies outside together. Our studio work has always been quite separate, and in the second year, we did again go out on location together and talk about our experiences. But it wasn't until the sort of the final months where we started bringing it back together and seeing where the connections were and seeing how we would jointly present it. And I think it was quite important that we gave ourselves, rather than trying to predetermine and trying to sort of lock the thing together as a joint show too early on, it was quite important for us to kind of do our studies together, go off in our directions, and then bring it back together. I think that was quite important, because ultimately we've both got these three types of landscape that we're both working on, and that's how we've shared the exhibition. But it was important that we had that flexibility to go off, so that we have very different takes, as you'll see in the exhibition how different our work is, but with those common themes.
Our identity in the exhibition, well, we've not really focused on too much about that this will be my work and that will be your work. I think that was just come about on its own, really. When we put the work together on the final day, when you're trying to decide where everything's going to go in the exhibition, on the hanging day. I think that will probably be part of it, maybe. But I think it will just do it on its own, really, because we've both got our strengths, and you can tell. I think you can tell whose work is which. It's hard to know when you're so close to it. I suppose that will be up to the observer, really, to do that.
I think we were always aware that although we were studying the same subject, we would both have very different angles on it. And so Hugh focuses a lot on colour and light. He, uses his oil paints in amazing ways. But for me, I'm more about understanding the marks of those landscapes, how I feel about them, the textures and the materiality of the landscapes. And so I think because we come at it from different ways and we're using different media, I did feel that I think it's always been the case that it was like two sides of the same coin. So the commonality, as I said, was the actual landscapes, but the difference was, the way we were looking at it. And I think because, inevitably, I think we do influence each other, hopefully in positive ways, but our identity was retained by the fact that we are looking at it in different ways, and we're trying to get across different things in our work. And I hope that kind of holds true in the actual exhibition itself.
The restrictions of the pandemic affected us, but maybe it was a good thing, because before the pandemic, we probably would have gone much farther afield. Maybe we might have been seascapes, and they might have gone up to the lakes and different woodlands around the country, which was kind of it was very hard to focus that in, really. So when the pandemic did hit, we realised, that we were going to have to narrow that, because we didn't want to drive anywhere. We didn't want to, you couldn't drive anywhere, or you didn't want to walk, too far or get transport. So luckily, Mosley, it is in the hills, and you can see all the escapes we did from the top Mosley, which is moorland, woodland, and in the valley. So wherever you walk, it's in a valley, so that really helped. So we explored, found a lot of footpaths and walks and wildlife around the area. I think it's made the work stronger, having to focus on the local area, because it's made you look a lot harder at where you are, really, and also you get to know. Say, I have favourite trees and favourite views, and we go to the same spot a lot, but there's always something different to see in that spot. You can always extract something else from it, like even a single tree. I've painted it over and over again and used it to zoom in and zoom out, and saw it through all the seasons, and so yeah, it's good to see everything in the seasons. There's lots that's happened in the last 2 years, especially this year in 2021. That has changed. I've made the work change a lot. I think the major thing was it's. It can be very hard to talk about, but my mum passed away, so I was doing the studio work during that time, and I had to, I carried on for a couple of weeks, and I had to stop. So stopped the studio work, really, and I went back out, painting again outside. So I just needed to, sort of be outside painting. So, and I started painting sunrises and sunsets for some reason. So I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning, painting the sunrise, and then in the afternoon I'll be back up there by 5 to it went dark, painting the sunset. So, so that was quite. So I did a lot of plein air painting and a lot more getting up early. It's a very special time of the day in the morning at that time, and you see these beautiful colours. I had to move studios as well, and so that took another month out of the painting. So I had to do that So that was something else. That was very difficult. So, and then I went back to studio work. So, and then I had this idea just before I moved studio, and after. It was on hold, this idea for 5 weeks, and when I moved back into the new studio, I went back to studio work again for the first time since my mum passed away, and it was completely different from the other work, really.
The pandemic did change things quite a lot, and I think emotionally, because of all of the uncertainty, I think that's also had a challenging impact. And for example, things like media were running out, we had to constantly keep ordering and making sure, and I think things that we hadn't really thought about as being an issue practically became an issue, like they were running out of canvases in the suppliers, we couldn't get certain things. So I think that emotionally, inevitably, that creates a little bit of tension when, there's this idea that you're painting landscape and it's all going to be really lovely and surrounded by daisies and all very, sort of touchy-feely. But I think the practicalities of the pandemic had an impact. And also there have been quite a few challenges actually for both Hugh and I. So Hugh's mum died and my dad's been very sick. And also I lost my companion greyhound, and that really did throw me actually. That happened in September of 2021, and I think I had to think, because the thing was my greyhound had influenced my studio practice quite a lot. So because she was getting older, I had to kind of organise myself around her, and when she passed, I just kind of almost lost my way. And also there was lots of memories of my experience of her in those landscapes and being with me. So I think that there was a kind of a change of gear, and I gave myself a month actually or a few weeks to really be quite gentle with myself and to try and dip into the work, even though there was the pressure of getting things done. But inevitably, emotionally, all of these things are very close to the surface, because painting is very emotional. When you have these things, massive things happening, it kind of impacts. I think that's life though. Whenever you're painting, there's all those things going on in your life, and they inevitably feed into the works. And when Tansy passed, I was working on the Heather Moors, and I certainly got to a point with those where I just got stuck. And then there were some breakthroughs and some things as I started to think quite a lot more positively about my experience of having that companion greyhound, because she was such a big influence. But she was also, I also got to the reckoning that she was a rescue, and she'd had quite a bad experience before coming to me, and I kind of managed to kind of get my head around that idea of the time I'd spent with her was really valuable and very positive, and the experience of having looked after her and feeling that I'd done right by her turned itself around in my head so that I could carry on painting, whereas at first it becomes very difficult to do that. And I think it's sometimes but the thing about it is that throughout this time we've been very fortunate to have not only the exhibition that has kept us going, but also the landscape has been such a massive positive on our mental health, I'm pretty sure, because we've been going out there and we've been feeling quite connected to it through the painting. I think on the one hand we've had these very difficult things to deal with, but our experience and connection with the landscape has helped us keep going and given us a positive vibe, because I just think the countryside is such a massive deal for everybody's mental health. And if we can all get out there and spend more time there, it always has a positive impact, I find. Even if you're not feeling good, it will always have that kind of calming influence. And so I think in a way, yes, there have been these things, but thank goodness we've had the landscape as our sort of support really through the time.
So this new work is very much focused on the landscape inside out sort of theme. So I created a landscape inside the studio, and I created its own atmosphere with lighting. So I painted that onto the canvas, and from that I imposed, using the plein air paintings as studies, I entwined the outside, which was like the reality, sort of weaving inside the inside landscape. It sounds very complicated, but when you see the painting, it will make sense. So the idea of that was, I know you can create your own landscape inside, really, and you sort of your own way of, like coping and sort of just enjoying yourself, really, just making things, and just whatever that is. It can be, the inside landscape can be anything, and then the outside landscape, from walking and doing things, enjoy outside, entwined, because just like life, you got the outside influencing you. So you can take it different ways, really. So when you look at the painting, the viewer, they might see something completely different, which is what I want people to do. Just to enjoy it and look at it, and figure out their own story with it. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to know my story behind it. So so I've just started exploring that, really. So I'll be interested to see people's reactions, what they think of the painting as well. So it'll be interesting. And creating the inside landscape with was my fascination with making things. So I'd make little models out of paper and splice them, cut them together, and very simple sort of models of trees and things, and bushes, and so that's part of the creative part of the painting as well, is making these models, and then making, like when you was a kid and you'd make little hills and things out of the clothes horse and things like that, and out of duvets, and so it's going back to being creative, that side of things as well. It's almost got an enchanted feel about it. So that's part of the journey, really, and lighting it and things like that, and it's just really so I'm not trying to plan it out, so I don't do any sketches. I just start cutting things up and making things out of clay as well, modelling clay, and make animals, and nothing's to scale, so it doesn't have to be. Just like when you're a kid, none of your toys are to scale. Just have fun, really.
Ongoing, we have been going to the gallery when we can, when it hasn't been closed because of lockdown, to experience that place. And I think the thing that we've always loved about it has been the fact that it has that connection with the surrounding landscapes, because it's a very light space and it has massive windows and you actually can see the moors. And that for us has been quite a pull and a driver. I think it's only the last months where we've got enough of the paintings and we know where it's heading, where we've started to try and really envision what the gallery, how we can use the gallery space. And I suppose for both of us, we both kind of almost wanted to have the landscape as being almost set up like the landscape. So the more into the exhibition, the central part of the exhibition will be more the woodland start. The outside boundaries would be the moorland. So we'd almost like arrange it as the landscape is arranged. And I think we both have a feel that will be the thing that would enable us to kind of put the paintings together to tell a story of our experience of that landscape, really. And we're very fortunate because of the nature of it and the nature of the fact that it's got movable walls, we can be quite flexible with how we can do that. So we don't we can have a kind of a connection with the outside landscape because we can arrange the walls so that we've still got the views from the gallery of those landscapes, as well as obviously having the views of the exhibition itself. So there's that kind of connection. One of the things that Hugh and I have always said was that we wanted this exhibition to not just be a series of finished paintings. It has to tell the story and share the journey of how we've got to the point of the finished paintings. And so for us, the drawings and the studies and those explorations that we do, mostly on location, are a big part of it. And so having a wall dedicated to show those drawings and studies is really important, because it is our connections, really. That is our connection, our primary connection with those places that we've done the paintings of. And so you'll see on the walls, you see very much the drawings that we did on location of all the different places during the different seasons. You see the colours, you see the marks, you see the lines, you see the ways in which we've explored those landscapes. And my studies and Hugh's studies are put together so that you can see the similarities and the differences. And I think what will be quite interesting for people is that they will see and hopefully get that feel and connection with those landscapes through our drawings before they see the paintings, which are a kind of a stage on from that, really. So I think I see the drawings and the studies on the wall as our immediate connection with the places, and the paintings are our workings out of what those places mean to us and how we want to present them as we explore that journey of relationship with the landscape.
What we want the viewer to take from this exhibition is to feel good about, to have a positive experience, really, from when they go into the exhibition and get that energy of nature, from the paintings and from the work. And maybe they might want them to go outside themselves into nature, or get that well-being feeling about it from the exhibition, from the paintings,
My hope with people as they're walking around the gallery is really to get the sense of these landscapes, to get the feel of them, and to experience those landscapes in a way that gives them that real sense of those places. I think for me, it would be so wonderful if people would come around the gallery and say, I really get how that felt in the spring in the woodland, or how it felt, that expanse of moorland. So it's that getting, I think if anything, it's for people to experience the feel of those landscapes, and also importantly to be inspired to say, actually, these artists have really got so much from going out into the countryside, is to get out into the countryside and experience them. You don't have to paint and draw, but it's just being out there in that countryside and that feel of those places, and the freedom of being out in those places, especially during something like a lockdown.
As an artist, the whole exhibition and the experience has pushed me more than any other exhibition, and it's made me into a lot better artist. Especially with things being very difficult circumstances. What we've all gone through and everything, with the pandemic and everything, and it makes you realise what you can do, and cherish what you can do, really, and really focus on that, and make it help you, and maybe help other people who look at the paintings and they might want to paint, or they might want to go out walking or something like that. So it's it's really pushed me as an artist, really.
I hadn't got the experience of many paintings. I had done one of the main size I have in the exhibition. So through the 2 years, that the push of having a focus to be able to develop all of those paintings and to do them much larger than I had ever done before, and to do the number that I have done, I think looking back, I'm kind of looking, if I look back over the year, I think I don't know how I managed to do all of those paintings. But what it's given me is an opportunity to work in series on a larger scale. And that idea of working back and forth between paintings has really helped me to understand not only my relationship with the subject matter, but also with the materials. And so now I think I'm much more comfortable with taking risks in the paintings, which I wouldn't have done before. So I will come into the studio and say, I need to mess this up because it's not going in the right direction. And before, I would never have had the confidence to do that. But you know that actually you sometimes have to do that, and you have to push things, you have to push the boundaries, you have to do things that are outside of the box, so that you can push at what it is you're trying to say in the work. And I think by having this 2 years and being able to have the opportunity to paint the number of paintings, it's really taken me not only out of my comfort zone, but it's pushed me to do more than I would have done had I not had the exhibition. So I think now, I'm much more able, now, to see how I need to push things in the future, because I've been able to push things over the last 2 years despite the hurdles. And actually, I think it's also taught me that actually it's better when you have hurdles. Things don't need to be too easy, because otherwise you don't push yourself enough. It's interesting to note that my best drawings on location were done when I had extremes of weather, when I had to hold on to the paper for dear life, when things were blowing all over the place. And that's when I think you start really getting to grips with being very spontaneous. And that's what you always want to do in the studio. So I think it's kind of developed me on with my location work, but also with the kind of the way I paint, and being a lot more not exactly gung-ho, but a little bit more brave, I suppose, because what's the worst thing that can happen?